Hi, Greenheart community, and welcome to today's episode of Greenheart at Home. This is Miss Allie here, and today we're going to join Miss Emma and Miss Amanda out in one of our Greenheart gardens for a garden tour and some trivia. Miss Amanda and Miss Emma are going to walk us through our garden at Sullivan's Island Elementary School and show us the crops that have been growing there throughout this spring. As Miss Amanda and Miss Emma walk us through our garden, we're going to practice curiosity and stay really focused on the information that they're sharing. We're going to test our knowledge and test what we've learned at the end of each garden bed with some pop quiz trivia questions to see what you remember. Before we send it out to Miss Emma and Miss Amanda in the garden, we're going to review our 3 Greenheart rules of respect so that they're fresh in our minds as we head out to our garden tour and trivia. The first thing that we respect in Greenheart is that we respect ourself. Take a second to think of a way that you can respect yourself in today's lesson. The second thing that we respect in Greenheart is we respect our Greenheart buddies. What is one way that you can respect your buddies today in this lesson? And our third Greenheart rule of respect is that we respect the earth. We'll notice that when Miss Emma and Miss Amanda are out in the garden, they're being careful to respect the plants that are growing and being careful of all the insects that they see. Those are 2 great examples of ways to respect the earth. What's a way that you can practice respect for the earth in today's lesson? All right, buddies, now that we've reviewed the Greenheart rules of respect, we're going to do a sample trivia question to see if you were focused and remember what we just talked about. Our first trivia question to get our brains started today is, what are our 3 Greenheart rules of respect? Do you have all 3? That's right. We respect ourselves, we respect our Greenheart buddies, and we respect the earth. Looks like y'all are ready to get out to our garden. Let's send it out to Miss Emma and Amanda to start us on our garden tour.
Hey buddies, it's Emma, your STEM educator here.
And Miss Amanda, Program Director with the Greenheart Project. And we're here at one of our school gardens to give a garden update, and it's exciting. So we're gonna go bed by bed and show you all the hard work that our students put into the gardens earlier this year. Hey buddies, we are here at bed number 5 at one of our school gardens, and if you can't tell already, this bed is growing our strawberries. So this is one of our favorite Greenheart crops to grow. We planted them back in December during a lesson called Planting for Future Generations. This is our very last lesson. So they grew all winter long, got nice and big, and they are finally starting to fruit, which is really exciting. So we're gonna go in and look for ripe berries and learn a little bit about the strawberry plant. So I see one growing in here. All right, and so the strawberry plant, it's really interesting. When we planted it, we were really careful not to bury the crown of the plant, which is where all the new growth comes from. So you can see all the little leaves starting to come in through there. The strawberry plant shoots underground. It sends out runners, and it grows all of these berries. And so if you look at the strawberry plant, let's look at a flower here. When the flowers start to blossom, that lets us know that fruit's on the way. And so you can see this one, when all the leaves have fallen off, that center of the flower actually becomes the berry. So here's another even larger one where it's more obvious. It becomes a green berry. And as they start to ripen, they become lighter green and then white. Oh, we got a little bug on that one. And eventually, when they are ready to harvest, they become red and they ripen. So we can see that we've got some nice juicy strawberries starting to ripen here in this bed.
All right, buddies, it's Miss Allie here checking back in. Were we practicing curiosity while we were walking through our garden bed with Miss Amanda and Miss Emma? Were you focused and eager to learn something new? Did you maybe have some questions that you came up with while you were watching? Awesome. So now let's get into our trivia questions from our Bed 5 garden tour. The first question for our trivia is, what fruit is growing in this garden bed? Think you got it? We have strawberries growing. So those yummy fruits that are bright red when they're ready to eat are growing in bed 5 of our garden. The next trivia question, buddies, is what part of the strawberry plant had to stay above the soil when we planted it? If you were a Greenheart buddy this past year, you'll probably remember this because it's one of the most important things to consider when planting a strawberry plant. The answer is the crown of the plant. Miss Amanda pointed to it a few moments ago, and it's where all the new growth of our strawberry plant comes from. All right, buddies, final trivia question for bed number 5. What part of the plant turns into our strawberry fruit? I'll give you a hint. Miss Amanda held it up to show us how this process happened. Got an answer? It's the flower. Miss Amanda showed us how the white flower's center starts to turn into that light green berry, which eventually turns white and then red into our sweet, juicy strawberry. How did you do, buddies? Ready to get to our next garden bed? Me too. Let's send it back out to Emma and Amanda.
We are here at bed number 4, our pollinator bed, and as you can see, there are lots of things growing. So about a month ago, we planted some king sunflowers and some Mexican sunflowers. So you can notice these big, tall, strong sunflowers are growing towards the sky. As you can come in here, some of these leaves are starting to turn yellow, which is completely normal, and they'll start to fall off as the sunflower grows big and strong. What kind of roots do you think are under these sunflowers? Little teeny ones or big strong ones, Miss Amanda?
Big strong ones, Miss Emma. They've got to hold up a big old stalk. One of our sunflowers last year got up to 12 feet.
12 feet. Wow. There are also lots of herbs and other flowers that are growing in here. If you look closely, this is a dill, and that smells really good. So let's take a little bit. Give it a nice smell, yum. I would put this on maybe a piece of fish or some chicken, and I would eat it right up. But there is lots going on in this bed, as you can see. What kind of bugs and some pollinators do you think helped grow these flowers big and strong, Miss Amanda?
Well, one of my favorite pollinators is the honeybee, and another one is the monarch butterfly. And so we've seen some of these coming along in this bed and going from flower to flower, and pollinating the rest of our garden.
So thank you, buddies, for all of your hard work to plant these beautiful pollinators.
All right, buddies, we just heard all about bed number 4, so it's time for our next set of trivia questions. My first trivia question for you is what type of plants were growing here in this bed? That's right, we have pollinators growing in bed 4. So pollinators are things like sunflowers, dill, cilantro, nasturtium flowers. All these plants that we have growing in our pollinator mix help to bring pollinators to our Greenheart gardens. All right, buddies, next question. How tall was the tallest sunflower in our Greenheart garden last year? I'll give you a hint. Miss Amanda shared us with this fun fact during our tour. Do you remember the number? Our tallest sunflower last year was 12 feet tall. And our third trivia question for bed number 4 is what are 2 pollinators in our Greenheart garden? Now, Miss Amanda mentioned 2, but we need to remember that there are a lot of different pollinators that can help our gardens. Miss Amanda talked about the honeybee and the monarch butterfly. But in addition to these 2 insects, there are also a bunch of other insects and animals that help to pollinate our garden. There are different types of bees. There are some species of moths will help to pollinate our garden. Wasps can help as well. Other insects, including a handful of flies and beetles, can be pollinators. And in addition to those, we also have 2 animals, birds and bats, that can also help to pollinate our green heart gardens. How did you do, buddies? Were we focused and curious, and did we get them all right? Awesome. Let's send it back out to Miss Amanda to tour bed 3.
So we are here at bed number 3, which is one of my favorite beds. It's our tomatoes and basil. So earlier in the year, we planted these during a lesson that we called Better Together. And that involved companion planting. So we planted the basil alongside our tomato plants because we know that they grow really well together in the garden. They complement each other. And Miss Emma, do you know why something like a really strong smelling basil might help protect our tomatoes?
I'm really using my brain to think that they might keep some of those bugs away because they have such a strong smell.
Absolutely. So you can see that we planted them in every square foot where our tomatoes are. And that strong scent of the basil, which I'll take a little leaf off now, I'll break it off gently and take a strong smell. That smells delicious to me, but the bugs don't like this smell, and it masks the smell of the tomatoes. So it actually protects them. So you can see we don't have a ton of leaf damage on our tomatoes. And you can see down on the basil plant that we actually have some bugs that were coming in. So they're doing their job in protecting the tomatoes. And if you go and look at this tomato, Miss Emma, you can see that we have some little green tomatoes starting to come in. And so similar to the strawberry plant, the tomato is a fruit. And we know that tomatoes are coming when the plant starts to flower. And so once all the leaves fall off of these flowers, there will be a small green tomato bud in the center, right? These become what you see, these leaves become here what you see on the tomato. See how they look the same?
Yes.
And that center becomes the fruit that carries all of our seeds. When those start to ripen, what color do you think our tomatoes might turn, Miss Emma?
I think they might turn red.
Red, that's a good guess. We have beefsteak tomatoes that will definitely turn red. And we also have some tomatoes called sun golds. Any guess what color our sun gold tomatoes might be?
I'm thinking yellow.
Yellow, a bright yellowy orange. And those are our cherry tomatoes, which are smaller. So those are fun to just pop right off the vine and put in your salad, eat alongside your basil. So basil and tomatoes go well together in the garden and on your plate.
All right, buddies. Now that we've seen bed 3, it's time for our trivia questions. My first question for you is, what plants are growing here in bed 3? That's right. We have tomatoes and basil that are growing. The tomatoes were the vines growing up in the middle of our garden bed that had the small green tomatoes starting to form on them. Our basil were the plants that outlined our garden bed and were green and leafy. Miss Amanda told us that these plants are companions, meaning that they support each other as they grow. My next trivia question for you is, how does basil protect our tomatoes? And I'll give you a hint. Miss Emma and Miss Amanda were talking a lot about the smell of basil. How did this help to protect our tomatoes? Do you remember? So the smell of our basil is so strong that it keeps our pests away. Pests are the bugs in our garden that might try to eat our tomato plants and hurt them as they're trying to grow. My final question for you in bed number 3 is, what colors will our tomatoes be? So Miss Emma remembered that a lot of tomatoes are red, and so our beefsteak tomatoes that are in our garden will be red when they're ready to eat. Miss Amanda mentioned that we also have sun gold tomatoes growing, which will be the color of the sun, yellow. That being said, we're going to have 2 different colors of tomatoes in our garden, both red and yellow. How did you do, buddies? Awesome. Let's send it back out to Miss Emma for our next garden bed.
Okay, I'm here at bed number 2, which I have a lot of gratitude for our 5th graders who planted our herbs and then some root vegetables because we had this idea that we were going to pickle some root vegetables. So as you can see in this half of the bed, there's basil and dill and fennel, parsley, oregano, lots of great herbs that give our foods lots and lots of flavor. There's also rosemary in here. This whole half of the bed has a really good smell. On this half of the bed, we planted radishes and carrots. If you look closely, this is the leaf of a carrot. So as we know, root vegetables, they grow underground, so we can't really see the carrot yet, but we know that it's still growing under there. We also have some radishes growing. And if you look really closely, you can notice that some of these radishes are starting to pop up towards the soil. That gives us a really big clue that they are ready for us to harvest. So Miss Amanda, I am going to come over on this side and harvest one of these yummy radishes. Okay, this one is a nice red color. It also has a good big size and it's starting to pop up off of the soil. So I know that it's ready for me to harvest and take home. So I'm going to use my finger to dig around, just moving and locating the soil. And then I'm going to come to the top of the stem and I'm going to wiggle my radish out. You can tell at the bottom, here are the roots. The roots suck up all the water and nutrients to help our vegetables and our leaves get really big and strong. So this looks like a very tasty radish for us to possibly pickle. Also in bed number 2, you might notice this big square. This is our compost. Our compost is like a snack for our soil. Let's take a peek what's inside. So you might notice some leaves that are starting to rot or some of those strawberries that maybe the squirrels have been snacking on. And if we're lucky, we'll hopefully see some little buddies like some bugs. Miss Amanda, do you see any bugs in there?
I do. We've got some little gnats flying out, and I bet if I dug down, we might see some worms and some of our other friends who live in the compost helping to break down these greens and these browns into healthy soil. Miss Emma, can you remind us what our compost FBIs are?
Yes, the FBIs in our compost that help break down all of those things to give our soil some yummy nutrients are fungi, bacteria, and invertebrates.
Wow, buddies, there is a lot going on in bed number 2. This set of trivia questions is going to really test your memory because we're going to have 4 questions instead of just 3. My first question for you about bed number 2 is, what are some of the plants that are growing here? Miss Amanda and Miss Emma listed a lot of plants. I want you to brainstorm at least 3 that you remember are growing in this bed of our garden. Do you have an idea? So you'll remember that there were a bunch of herbs that we had growing in this garden bed. Things like basil, dill, fennel, parsley, oregano, and rosemary, which are all herbs. The other thing that we have growing in this garden bed is our root vegetables. You might remember Miss Emma showing us how to harvest one of these root vegetables, a radish, and also showed us the tops of our second root vegetable that we have growing, which were carrots. Did you remember some of those crops? Awesome. All right, my next question for you, my Green Heart buddies, is where do root vegetables grow? So where do our carrots and our radishes grow? Did you guess underground? That's correct. Our root vegetables grow from the roots of our plant, which live underneath the soil. Our radishes and our carrots grow their entire time underground, and like Miss Emma showed us, will start to pop up above the soil when they're ready to harvest. All right, buddies, the third trivia question I have for you is, what was inside of the big wooden cube in bed number 2? Inside our cube is our compost. Compost is nature's recycling. So we take natural scraps and other organic materials from our garden and put them back into this cube where they can break down and turn back in to healthy, nutritious soil for the crops that we're growing. Now, if you've done a Green Heart lesson before, you might know the answer to this final bonus trivia question, but it's a tough one. Miss Emma and Miss Amanda talked about some of the organisms and creatures that are inside our compost pile that help to break down our garden waste and turn it back into soil. In Green Heart, we call these things our compost FBIs. So our final bonus trivia question is, what are these compost FBIs? Like I said, buddies, this is a tough one. So let's go letter by letter to see if we can remember our compost FBIs. So the first is our F, which stands for fungi. So this is something like mushrooms will show us that our compost pile is breaking down correctly. The second is our B, which is bacteria. Bacteria is super, super tiny, so you won't be able to see it with your bare eye. But our compost pile can show us that bacteria is active because it'll give off heat. The third compost FBI is our I, which stands for invertebrates. These are creatures that, unlike humans, don't have spines, but they work hard in our compost pile to eat our garden waste and help process it and break it down into fertile, healthy soil. One of these compost FBIs are these slimy things that we find in our Green Heart gardens, are earthworms. These are super important example of an invertebrate that help our compost to break down. All right, buddies, now that we've really tested our minds, let's get back out to Miss Amanda for our final garden bed.
All right, buddies, and we're at our last bed here at our garden. So this is bed number 1. And in here, this is where we have planted our 3 sisters. Miss Emma, do you know what the 3 sisters are?
I do. Corn, beans, and squash.
Perfect. So, buddies, we planted our corn back in March, and it is starting to germinate. As you can see, some of the corn seeds germinated, which means they sprouted into a corn sprout. They broke out of their seed casing and they turned into this lovely corn plant earlier than others. So some I've had to come back and reseed, and that's normal. Sometimes seeds germinate and sometimes they don't. So you always want to keep an eye on your garden. So for this one, this corn sister, the oldest sister, is probably ready for me to come in and plant my bean and to plant my squash alongside it. And this is a Native American planting tradition. It's an Iroquois legend and planting tradition of intercropping. And so we plant the corn, the beans, and the squash together in the garden because just like the tomato and basil, they complement each other in the garden and on the plate. So in the garden, the corn stalk, as you can see, it's tall and strong. We wanted to plant it ahead of time to give it a chance to get nice and tall. This stalk will provide support for our bean sister, the second sister, that will wrap up around the corn, and it needs that support to stay upright. The squash sister, just like this lettuce that I've let grow but popped up from last year, the squash will stay low and will provide shade for the plants, and the prickly leaves will help to keep pests away. So there's a ton of other ways that they support each other in the garden. The beans also fix nitrogen, which is something that all of the plants need to grow. So they are really important plants that can grow together well. So we are following this planting tradition, and we are excited to come back in very soon and plant our beans and squash, and these will grow all summer long.
All right, buddies, our final garden bed tour is complete. It's time for our last set of trivia questions. Since it's our last one, we're going to have the most questions yet, so get your brains ready. The first question I have for you about bed number 1 that we just saw is, what plants are growing in this garden bed? if you remember, Miss Amanda told us about how we're growing our three sisters crops. These crops are corn, squash, and beans. As Miss Amanda shared with us, there's a special reason that we put these three crops together. So my next trivia question for you is, why do we plant these crops together? Do you remember what Miss Amanda taught us? That's right. So we plant these crops together because they, just like tomatoes and basil, are companions and they support each other in their growth. This planting technique is called the Three Sisters technique and comes from an Iroquois legend, which Miss Amanda talked about. In this legend, which is a story, corn is the oldest sister because it's the tallest and the strongest. Our squash is our middle sister because it's the second biggest. And our beans are the little sister because they're the smallest. These three sisters are called the Three Sisters because just like sisters do, they support each other and help each other to grow. Each of these crops plays an important role for the other crops to help them grow, which we're going to go over now. So my next question for you buddies is, what does our corn do to support our squash and our beans? So Miss Amanda explained to us that our corn is tall and strong. This strong stalk, which is the center part of the corn plant, allows our beans to grow. So our beans are going to vine around this stalk, and the corn stalk will support our beans as they grow. The next sister, our squash, also plays an important role in supporting our three sisters. Do you remember, what does the squash do? So our squash stays low to the ground, and the leaves of the plant provide shade for our three sisters. The squash leaves also are prickly, which can keep pests away, which, just like with our basil that had a strong smell and kept pests away, our squash will protect our three sisters by keeping insects away that might harm or damage our crops. So for our third sister, our beans, do you remember what our beans do to help support our corn and our squash as they grow? The beans help to fix nitrogen in the soil. So nitrogen is an important element and helps feed our corn and our squash to help them both grow big and strong. Beans put this nutrient out into our soil for our corn and our squash to absorb. So they're really important in making sure that our other two sisters have the nutrients they need in order to grow. How did we do, buddies? That was a tough one. That's the last set of trivia questions that we have today, buddies. Let's send it back out to Miss Emma and Amanda so they can say their goodbyes to us before we wrap up.
All right, Greenheart community, that is all. It was so much fun being here with you. We have so much gratitude for all of the students and teachers and our whole community who helped to grow these gardens earlier in the year.
We miss you, and we hope you are staying healthy and having fun and enjoying some sunshine. We can't wait to get back out in the garden with you soon.
All right, Greenheart buddies. So we've come to the end of our Greenheart lesson today, and let's practice some Greenheart gratitude by saying thank you to Miss Emma and Miss Amanda for guiding us through our garden tour today. I also want to say a big thank you to all of my Greenheart buddies, you guys, who helped me today to practice curiosity, to grow our brains, to stay focused, and to listen carefully to learn something new about our gardens that we have growing here at Greenheart. So thank you for practicing curiosity and for joining me today for our tour and trivia lesson. Bye for now, buddies.